using this first. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Alexi, for that perfect handover, basically, because that's what I'm going to focus on, like how is AI going to be utilized, or how can AI going to be utilized when not protecting us, but more attacking us, and especially in the focus of social engineering and phishing attacks. Alexi said it already, it's more like a hypothetical thought experiment, but on the other hand, we also have some very solid cases, or at least one solid case from this summer, where AI was most likely used in order to conduct a social engineering attack. My name is Niklas Hellemann. I'm one of the managing directors of SoSafe. At SoSafe, we are like totally focusing on the human side of cybersecurity, putting the human in the middle of everything, and trying to, so to say, increase the human intelligence before the artificial intelligence is going to kick in. And I'm a psychologist by trade, so I'm also having a more or less like exotic profile for the area of cybersecurity, but also for the area of artificial intelligence. But regarding the current threat landscape, the human factor is a really important thing. So hackers nowadays also have to be good psychologists and not only have a tech focus. So, and this is actually the first picture. It's a cliche. So the hacker sitting in front of lines of code, looking for a zero-day exploit. It can use he or she can use to actually enter systems of companies. But if we are looking at the current threat landscape, this is nothing but a cliche, because 9 out of 10 kill chains, 9 out of 10 hacks on companies are starting with a human, so starting with an employee. And we also see that these kind of like social engineering and human-based attacks are getting much more complex. So like 3/4 of every companies all around the world are experiencing some form of social engineering attack attempt every year. But if Alexi already told us the whole business email compromise thing, which is also a part of or some form of social engineering. I think currently every kind of company is experiencing at least some attack attempt. So social engineering is at the center of most more complex attacks when looking at companies. And it's also the fact that over 90% of all attacks start currently with a phishing email because it's so easy. It's basically a very efficient way to get into the systems of companies, and hackers nowadays are very professionalized, they are organized, so they are acting according to business case. So when you're acting according to a business case, you are basically using the most simple way into a system, and that's currently is the user, especially in times of like cloud applications, etc. It's very easy to enter a system of a company just via email. And we also see that these attacks are getting much more sophisticated. Hackers are putting much more time and money into the attacks, so we see a huge surge, a huge rise in basically spear phishing attacks or more targeted attacks where a certain victim inside of a company is getting targeted. There's information gathering happening up front, and we see a surge in those kinds of attacks, which also demonstrates that there's a lot of money involved because hackers are taking more time to conduct more complex attacks, basically. And that's also the reason why we see phishing and social engineering attacks in all kinds of segments, all kinds of sizes of companies. A couple of years ago, it was limited to the large ones, the really, really profitable victims. But nowadays, we also see spear phishing attacks in very small companies. We, for example, have like 50 employee companies that are targeted by a spear phishing campaign. And you also have the very prominent ones. 2016, we had the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton, basically attacked and successfully attacked by a phishing campaign. It was a comparatively simple attack, basically based on a Google Mail warning, your account has been compromised, sent out to the campaign leader, and like very conveniently, it also included a link to actually renew the password, and he clicked on it, and basically all these internal emails were leaked afterwards. Then we had a very prominent case here in Germany. Leonie, most of you probably have heard of it, was an example of a very, very lucrative CXO or CFO fraud. Basically, a fraudster sent out an email, spoofed the email address of the CFO, and basically asked an employee for a wire transfer of 40 million euros, which then was executed, and basically, yeah, that money is lost. There's currently, I don't think there's a lot of cyber insurances that would cover such a case, because it's basically also a problem of the internal processes, that there's no 4I principle, etc. So very lucrative and very, very costly for companies if it's successful. And the case of Leonie basically was a simple attack, probably a couple of hours of preparation. Then we also have smaller organizations, also a case from Germany. The Lucas Hospital in Neuss a couple of years ago was hacked by a very broad phishing campaign based on a malware or ransomware in that case. You can see here it's not only money that is at stake, it's also in certain cases, or increasingly cases, it's also the lives of people that is at stake. Basically here the consequence was that the Lucas Hospital had to shut down their emergency room for a week, basically, which is especially sad because they were pioneers in digitalization in the healthcare sector, and basically they had a huge threat or exposure because of that. So you can see it's really effective, and it can be costly, but it can also be really dangerous. And if we look at the schemes of those social engineering and phishing attacks we see currently, then we can also see or realize that these schemes are not really new. Basically, you all have heard probably of the Nigerian Scam. It's the label for a nowadays really prevalent form of advance fee scam. So the fraudster is going to ask you if you can transfer a couple thousand of euros because he is sitting somewhere, but he's a rich heir and has huge millions at a bank account he cannot unfreeze, and he needs some money. And if you give it to him, then you will be participating in that huge fortune that will be released afterwards. And that kind of scam is prevalent a couple of hundred years ago, already is in the can be traced back to a fraud called the Spanish prisoner, which was already prevalent in the 18th century, not via email, not via fax, but in this case via regular mail or like real person messengers. So we see, like, over those 200 years ago, we haven't learned a lot, basically. Parallel to that, the technological innovation took also place. So we have still the same schemes, still the same tactics fraudsters are using, but we have much more evolved technology. So I was already talking about spear phishing attacks. It's only one form of complex attacks that are conducted. Basically, the fraudster is looking up information about the victim, from social media especially, like for example, your position information in social media, in like professional networks like LinkedIn or Xing. It's a perfect resource for information gathering, and then basically designing an attack tailored to you as a person, which is going to be very, very convincing. Another one is a so-called Doublebarrel, where it's a chain of various messages where the first messages are used to legitimate the second one. So the first message would probably be from your CFO, just asking, hey, are you at the office? A really, really not malicious intent in that email. But the second one is then probably going to ask for a wire transfer of a certain amount of money. So the first one, you should keep that in mind because I'm going to return to that later, is really not really special and not really malicious, asking just for a normal thing. And we also see, maybe, I think not yet, but we see more complex forms of phishing in an automatized way. So automation also is being used for phishing attacks. Emotet is currently probably the most widespread malware around, and the really cool thing about Emotet is that it's so versatile, and that it's first changing its code constantly. So spam filters and antivirus software is really for a certain period of time not able to trace it down, and it's using something called dynamite phishing, which is really cool. It basically scans the Outlook account of a victim. It's called Outlook harvesting, and generating a network of people that this victim was actually in contact with. But even one step further, it also screens the content of that emails that were sent around, like legitimate emails, and generates emails based on that content and sends it out to a further victim. So this is basically spear phishing in an automated way. Some people call it artificial intelligence, but it's not based on current ML or deep learning models. It's more or less like based on like a keyword analysis, but you can see it's some form of automation that is used during phishing attacks, and it's really effective. I currently wouldn't know any company that is not being attacked, at least as an attempt, by a Emotet-based campaign. So that's also the reason why current spam filters and technological barriers are struggling to detect those emails. In most cases, like in cases of Emotet, they are not even carrying a malicious payload. So they're just carrying like an Excel file with a macro in it. So spam filters are really struggling. If we look at the numbers, currently there's around like 160 million phishing emails. This is not spam, just phishing emails sent out every day. Worldwide, and 90% are being filtered out. So that's, I mean, a huge sum, but still 10% are getting through the filters, and that's a very constant number. And after that, we see that half of those mails are being opened, and half of those are actually being interacted with. So with a really dangerous consequence. And the reason is because the reason basically is that employees are not really able to spot a really well-made phishing email from a legitimate one. So you could see where should we actually optimize. I mean, the current ML models are probably going to optimize on the left part, but I think there's still some way to go. But it's much easier to pull that lever on the right, educating people. And that's going to be a hard thing because there's also going to be AI applications that are focusing on those people and are carrying out people-based attacks. But one step back. First, we have a lot of AI and ML applications that are there to help us, basically. I mean, that's the main reason why we are advancing in AI, and especially in that field of human-computer interface. AI should help us. So we have examples from text-to-speech and NLP. I mean, that's a very old example. You probably all know it. It's like Google Duplex. It's that AI avatar that can really interact with people. It's a voice-based bot, interact with people in a really realistic way. And we're going to see a lot of those applications in the future where we have voice interfaces in various areas of our lives that are really difficult to distinguish between those ones and real people. The problem with that is which channels can we actually trust in the future? Because if we have highly realistic voice bots, highly realistic deep fake-based interfaces or like facial avatars, which channel can we trust? So there's another example from the text-to-speech field. It's Lyrebird. You might also know it's a startup that had just been acquired by Descript. They operate a podcast editing tool, basically. But Lyrebird was I think 3 months ago, was open to the public, and it had a really, really cool feature, or a really cool main feature. It could create voice bots that imitate voices, like really realistically. And when they started 2016, you had to train it with around like 5 hours of training input. So voice files that were indexed, so voice files and text in parallel, tagged, like the voice files had to be tagged by the words that were spoken actually. And you had to train it like around 5 hours in order to have a really, really realistic voice mimicking bot. But it came up to 1 minute, so, and you're gonna hear an example like further. I trained it with like 15 minutes, and it's already pretty convincing. This is how it looked. Now it's close to the public, but I mean the model is still being trained, but only with the voices of people that are actually using it as a part of Descript. But a couple of months ago, you could still like train it with voice files, basically based on public people, on celebrities, etc. And that's also what they did. And they sent out this promotional video back then.
Hi, everybody. This night, I am happy to share with you a small announcement about a cool startup called Lyrebird. They launched today their website where you can create a digital copy of your voice. They only need you to record 1 minute of audio. This is just the beginning, and they are working hard to improve their results. They want to use this technology to change the life of everyone that lost their voice to a disease by helping them recover this part of their identities. Let's help them achieve this goal. You can help them testing their software and sharing this video with your friends.
Yeah, so we can see it's a really cool example because, I mean, you could technically hear that it's a digital manufactured voice, but I think it really sounded like Obama. And the thing is, there's some like beneficial applications to it, but obviously there's also some criminal applications to it. There's another example from the field of text-to-speech and deepfake video synthesis. Also, a couple of months ago, the National News Agency of China launched this AI news anchor. I also want to show this example
Hello,
quickly.
Everyone, I'm an English artificial intelligence anchor. This is my very first day in Xinhua News Agency. My voice and appearance are modeled on Zhang Zhao, a real anchor with Xinhua. The development of the media industry calls for continuous innovation and deep integration with the international advanced technologies.
Okay, it's based on a real news anchor, but it was said that this person basically was like digitally created, and you could basically enter text, and the avatar would actually transform that into this what we just saw. It's not really clear if it's really the case or if it was pre-rendered, but applications like this will be soon out there. Another and last one, and that's something I just implied. Some of these applications take like huge times of rendering. So in the area of deepfakes, we say basically it's these models are either really easily implemented, like you probably have heard of that Zao app where you can put your face into movie actors' faces. That's really easy. Takes not a long time, but it's not really convincing. If it has to be convincing, it takes a huge time of rendering, so it's not possible doing that like in real time. But there's also a research group at Stanford and the MPI in South Germany, and they developed a model that actually could do that in real time. And basically, this is also an example for that.
For both the source and target actor, we are able to manipulate YouTube videos in real time. Here, we demonstrate our method in a live setup. On the right, a source actor is captured with a standard webcam. This input drives the animation of the face in the video shown on the monitor to the left.
Yeah, you can see it's always presidents, US presidents being used. This is actually a really old video. So the current state of technology is much further advanced. And you don't need much fantasy to actually think about criminal applications of those like beneficial applications. And one is actually using especially the voice mimicking one in CXO or CFO fraud applications. Another one is extortion. That's also something we've seen in the wild, that videos are being created with people that are doing things they don't want to see anybody them doing, and then basically blackmail them with them. And also know your customer fraud. You all probably have opened a bank account using ID Now or some other identification method. And also, this is pretty obvious that these technologies could be used to basically circumvent those identification methods, or actually use it to commit identity theft. But if you look into that CXO fraud example, you remember I just talked about the Doublebarrel attack. This is something we presented at the BSI Congress, the Office of Security and Information Science of the German government. Like this May, we presented this hypothetical attack method, basically saying that an attacker could really easily train a voice bot based on a CEO's voice, call several top-level managers of a company in order to pre-legitimate an email sent afterwards with a malicious intent. So, I mean, not much fantasy involved. We also laid out how to actually conduct it, and it was not a lot of work, basically, to create a setup like this. And you could say, okay, so how to train a voice bot like this? We had a look at the CEO of Siemens, Joe Kaeser, and if you just look what's out there in basically voice resources, you have like 32,000 videos where he's speaking somehow. So you could basically generate a perfect training material for that kind of voice bot to train a voice bot based on Joe Kaeser's voice. And that would probably work like this. And this is me training that model for 15 minutes.
Hi, Lucas. Sorry, very briefly, we are voting right now. You have to help me with an extremely urgent matter. I'll send you an email with further information right away. I have to go. Thank you.
Okay, it took me 40 minutes in total to set this up. And if I had trained the model for a couple of hours more, it would be totally convincing. And you could also like change the tonality, change the pace of the speech. And then afterward, obviously, I would have sent an email telling my colleague to do that quick wire transfer to one of our suppliers. And he wouldn't actually think about it because he received this call before. And the first legitimation call doesn't even have to be really interactive. It doesn't have to involve a voice bot that reacts to the voice, because it would probably only be a voice message on his mailbox with some like airplane noise in the back and saying, okay, I'm just boarding a plane. I'm going to send you more details via email. And as I said, we presented this attack form at the BSI conference as a hypothetical example. But as a matter of fact, we've seen this summer the first news report of a possible attack like this. There was a UK energy company being attacked, possibly by an AI-based voice bot. It's still not really clear if it was really a voice bot, because we've seen in the wild, we've seen attacks like this also just using actors. But the insurance of that UK energy company really claims that it was a voice-based or voice bot-based attack, and a voice bot based on an AI model mimicking the voice of the CEO of the parent company, actually, of that UK energy company. So what can we do? I mean, the first thing is rely on technical methods. There's a lot of funding, there's a lot of stuff going on. The DARPA is giving out $140 million in order to create AI that can basically detect AI-generated fakes. There's models. There's one that's actually going to be published in December for the next presidential campaign in the United States, trained on all presidential candidates that can actually, spot really well a deep fake generated face. But again, I mean, as in all AI applications that are trained to detect other AI applications, they're always one step behind because, I mean, it's basically an arms race. So there will be technical methods. Another one was presented at Black Hat this year. There's going to be an AI model based on the hearing system of mice, like real mice, because apparently you can train mice to differentiate between fake voices and real voices, and they are putting that now in an AI model to basically also detect fake voices. The other thing is education. Alexei just said it. This is no science fiction. This could happen already today. It's still unclear if it's happening today because also the simple attacks are so effective. Hackers are pretty lazy people, so they will stick to that simple attacks until they are forced to move over to the technology that's already there. So spread the word. That's also one thing we are doing, like really intensively. Educate people, educate the broader population that this is no science fiction. That in the future their boss can call them, and behind it, it might be a voice bot. Another thing is like really systematically, and that's what we are doing at SoSafe, creating employee awareness tools to basically confront people with those kinds of attacks. We, for example, are also building a voice bot that will actually call the employees of our clients and present them to an attack like this to be one step ahead of the hackers. And that's actually, the only truth that's really important, because that's going to be the case also in the future. Also, when we have AI models, we think that hackers are still going to focus on the people, because Bruce Schneier already said a couple of years ago, amateurs hack systems and professionals hack people, and I think that's still going to be the case for the next couple of years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.